and welcome to Restoring Hope, the podcast of the Missionaries of the Precious Blood. Today, we're very excited to have Julian DaCosta, who is not only a companion with the Missionaries of the Precious Blood, but who is actively involved in prison ministry and has been for some years. So, welcome, Julian. Thanks for being our guest today.
Thank you. I'm honored.
Absolutely. Thank you. We're honored to have you. Julian, can we start by telling me a little bit how you became involved as a companion with Missionaries of the Precious Blood?
Yeah, absolutely. In about 2012, we had a new pastor join our parish. And within a couple of months, his name is Father Leo, and he tapped me on the shoulder, kind of said to me, hey, I think you have what it takes to be involved in prison ministry. And my initial reaction was absolutely not.
Okay.
I was in my late 40s at the time, and I jokingly said to him, I've spent the last 40 some odd years ensuring that I remain outside of prison. Why would you want to know? But if anyone knows Father Leo is very persistent. He doesn't push you too hard, but he would occasionally just kind of say to me, I think you need to reconsider. I think you need to reconsider. Anyway, jumped to, at one point, not that he became overbearing, but he kept being persistent.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, I'll show him. I will show up to one of the meetings and, then I'll be able to tell him I'm not interested in this ministry. So I showed up to the meeting, and there were probably about 12 men there. I was given a binder, and I sat in this meeting, and the leader was going through the binder, and I was very, very disconnected. I wasn't listening, and if I saw the men in the room switch the page, I would switch the page.
Okay.
So just pretending like
we do in school,
going
yeah.
along and I'm following through. But very unusual for me to be disconnected, but I totally was disconnected. Meeting ended, and I'm leaving the room, and Father Leo says to me, okay, Julian, we'll see you next Monday. And my response was, yes, Father. And I walked to my car, and I said, did I just tell Father Leo that I was going to return next Monday? And I did, and this many years later, I'm heavily involved in the ministry, and I'm blessed as a result of it.
Okay, it's fantastic. I mean, I think it's very admirable that anyone is involved in prison ministry, because obviously those are the people who need spiritual guidance, as do we all, but they need it especially. What have been some of your most transformative moments for you personally in the ministry?
So a couple of things that come to mind. I'll give you some background on my personal life. I was born to an unwed 15-year-old mother, and as a result, I was raised by her mother. So statistically, if you look at my background, I was born in Guyana, South America. It's the only English-speaking country in South America. And I moved to the United States in 1976 and had my formative years in the Bronx, New York City.
Oh, okay.
So you can imagine that came with a lot of, drugs and alcohol in my periphery. But my grandmother was very, very strong. And even though she wasn't Catholic, she encouraged me to go to Catholic school and Catholic church. And that kind of kept me on the straight and narrow. When I first started ministering in the prison ministry, I didn't necessarily think I had a story to tell. But the first time, so the way the program works is I'm involved in what's called Kairos Inside, where we spend about 3.5 days in prison with the men, anywhere from 25 to 35 men for the 3.5 days. And we share stories. So as you can imagine, when you go in there for the first weekend, you're just really observing. And so there's a leader that leads the weekend, and he prays about things and then chooses people to give different talks. And so, I was planning on just being a wallflower for the weekend, observing everything. And about 2 days before that first weekend, the leader called me and said, hey, Julian, I want you to know that individual X will not be coming on the weekend, and so you have to give that talk.
Oh,
Now, as you can imagine, first of all, we rehearse our talks. And so I said, is there going to be time for a rehearsal? Absolutely not. We don't have time. I'll see you in 2 days. I'm confident that you will do well. So my talk that weekend was on friendship with God. And, I prayed about it and I wrote my words down, and I presented for the weekend. And almost immediately, a couple of men approached me and openly shared that our backgrounds were very similar, but their lives took a different path than I. So, as you can imagine, I got very tearful, humbled, and honored to realize that, there, but for the grace of God, go I. For some reason, God saw something different in me, and I didn't follow the same path as the men in blue.
that's fascinating. What is the level of offense of the prisons that you work with?
So the specific prison that I work with is called Lake Correctional Institute, and it is, for lack of better words, it's a psych prison. So they get the highest intent. We have murderers, we have individuals that need psychiatric care. So the gamut. There are individuals in there, forfeit, money laundering, theft, and worst case, murder. And many of the men that we engage with are in there for the rest of their living life.
I gotta sneeze. Excuse me. Oh, we'll edit that. Um, so, Julian, what? So, I'm assuming that the men that you minister to have to have expressed some level of interest in in reconciliation, in being involved in the prison ministry. Is that correct, or do you ever work with ones who are just totally resistant to it and they just have to be there just because?
No, there's an application process. So the
Okay.
men that join us on the weekend do apply, but now sometimes their motivation is different, right? We feed them while we're there. They are outside of their cells because we meet them in a common area. So they hear stories and things like that. So some of them, the motivation is, I'm going to go spend 3.5 days and just have fun. I know I'm going to eat well, and so the reason it's 3.5 days is that Thursday night we meet them, we just welcome them, and we let them know we'll be spending the next 3.5 days with them, and to just be open to the process. We give them cookies then, and we leave. And our joke is, we whatever their motivation is there, by the second or 1.5 to 2 days, they start turning around, and almost 100% leave filled with the Spirit of God, and are ready to reconcile and things like that. Now, it is a spirit-based organization, but we cannot. So I'm Catholic, as are many of the men that we join with. So we can't offer confession and those types of things because that's a specific religion. But the fact is, some of the men do open up to some of us, and we plead confidentiality. So unless they say something that they are being harmed in prison or those types of things, everything remains confidential. And we give them those guidelines so that they know we are there to listen. We're not there to judge. And the mantra that we use in prison ministry is listen, listen, love, love. And so we just sit there, we listen to the men, we don't judge, and we let them know that God's already forgiven them.
So the missionaries of the precious blood often talk about healing in the blood of Christ. How does that spiritual image resonate with the men that you serve in prison?
So once we are done with the weekend, they do on their own weekly prayer sessions. So we teach them how to get together and continue this in prison, and they are there to help each other spiritually. And they meet once a week, and we go in there once a month and join them. And so that's how they kind of continue that spirituality.
Okay, all right. So the precious blood charism emphasizes reconciliation and renewal through Christ's blood. How does, and I might be asking the same question again. If so, let me know. How do you see that message come to life in your ministry? They're obviously, are they open to the reconciliation, and are they open to that specific call through the blood of Christ?
I would say yes. So they open to us, they open to each other. They know that they don't have to share anything that they don't want to, but many of them will tell us, Julian, I feel moved to tell you what I've done. And one thing that amazes me, 100% of the men, and I've been doing this for quite a while now, no one has ever said to me, I was not guilty of the charge that was put against me, which is something we always hear, that they're
Yeah.
all innocent people in prison. Without exception, you'll hear them say, I got together with the wrong group of people, and I got caught up in a situation, but they all take ownership of their past and know that in many cases they say being in prison has saved their lives.
Really?
Yes, absolutely.
And are many of them in prison for life without the chance of parole, or is there the title of our podcast is Restoring Hope. Is there hope? Is there hope of them getting out of prison?
You know what's amazing, Patrick, is we have encountered individuals who have made it clear to us that I am here for the rest of my life and there's no possibility of parole. However, we've had instances where some of those individuals have gotten out. And that has been amazing. I know of about 3 of them who were there for the rest of their life and were able to get out. And they were just as surprised as we were. I also know of at least 2 individuals who were 100% exonerated through
Really?
DNA. And so the courts and the prison system have had to pay them millions of dollars. Still, it doesn't
Yeah.
make up for the 42 years
Right.
that one gentleman was in there specifically. But when that gentleman came out, it was very tearful for many of us because, again, he never once told us that he was innocent, and he was proven to be innocent.
That is fascinating, and that's got to give you hope. I would think that would personally impact your ability to hope.
Yes, absolutely. And statistically, I believe the last time I heard the stats, 75% of incarcerated, when they get out, they end up going back into the system because they're struggling to get homes, they're struggling to get jobs. They end up doing some of the same things they were doing before and end up back in the system. That number drops to 34% when they have gone through our program.
Really?
Their lives have changed, and we cannot be on their visitor list. We cannot communicate with them other than when we go in once a month. We can't write to them. We can't visit to them. However, once they get out, we have a way of them reaching us, and we are encouraged to then help them.
And is there a good percentage of the men who do contact you afterward?
A small percentage do, yes.
Okay, good, good. So for you personally, how does, and again, we're all about restoring hope. How does the concept of restoring hope through reconciliation guide your interactions when you're ministering to the incarcerated?
Anytime that I'm going, whether it's on our monthly visit or when we're doing a weekend together, I say a prayer every single day, and that prayer just constitutes God, let me speak through me, right? So I'm just open. I don't go in there with any hidden agendas. I don't go in there with any specific thing that I want to say. And there are times when the men open to us that the human side of us wants to judge. And so I kind of make sure that my facial expression remains just casual. And, towards the end, I make sure they understand that God loves you, as do I, and God has already forgiven you for whatever you've done.
So do you find it at all difficult to balance kind of, I guess what would I assume would be tension between justice and mercy in your ministry, which are obviously 2 themes that are central to the precious blood spirituality. Does that ever cause an issue for you?
Not anymore. I'll tell you again, before, part of the reason that I didn't want to get involved in prison ministry was my thought process was, you did something wrong, you need to pay the crime. So the time, excuse me. So I judged, right? And my thought was, you deserve to be imprisoned. And I still believe that if you've done something wrong, we have laws and we should be law-abiding citizens. And if you end up in the prison system, you need to go in and pay your time. However, where my philosophy has changed is, once they get out, we don't forgive them. So again, they struggle to find jobs, they struggle to find housing. And so that's the justice piece that I fight, because I want to make sure that if they have paid their time and they're back in the system, that we forgive them and we try to help them change their lives.
So is it fair to say that the prison ministry helps you as much as it helps them? It kind of gives you a chance to, or an opportunity for reconciliation and to rethink how you feel. Is that accurate?
It's very accurate. I will tell you, and I apologize, I might be sharing more than the Kairos ministry would want me to do. However, towards the end, on the last day, we have what we call open mic. And each man that participated has the opportunity to share with us how this weekend affected them. And there's one particular gentleman that he affects me every single day,
Really?
every single hour. I won't use his name, but the weekend, it happened a couple of years ago. And one of my colleagues, who is now heavily involved in the ministry as well, went in with kind of sort of that negative attitude that I had initially, and he actually personally had been through the system. He had spent 8 years in prison. And so he had this attitude that we're not going to be able to change lives. And I said, dude, I probably felt the same way, just be open. And so we arrived that Thursday night, and when we first arrived, we get attached to about 2 or 3 men just to introduce ourselves, let them know that we'll be there with them for the next 3.5 days. And, if they have any questions, we try to answer them. And he got attached to this one gentleman that had been in the system for 38 years. And we actually carpooled. And so on the way back home, he said to me, if we're able to affect that gentleman in any way possible, I'll believe that our work is worth it. And so I said, just be open. And so about a day and a half into the program, he said to me, I'm seeing some changes in this gentleman. And I said, good, just continue to listen, love. And when we had open mic on that Sunday morning, that gentleman got up and his lips were quivering and the tears started coming out of his eyes. And he was in his mid-40s at the time, and again, had spent 38 years in the system. And the words that came out of his mouth, Patrick, was, I have never heard anyone tell me I love you.
Oh.
And this weekend, he had 35 men that all told him we loved him. And so I'm proud to say that he has turned his life around, and he's moved on to another institution, so I've lost contact with him.
Okay.
But he is on the right track, and that just helps motivate me each and every day.
Does he have any chance of parole?
I believe he does, yes.
Wow. Okay. All right. So speaking of an individual like that, how do you help individuals connect with faith, especially those who may feel abandoned or unworthy of forgiveness?
Those are the toughest ones, right? Because again, we let them know that God has already forgiven you. And many of them, they're the ones struggling with it. And, I'm guilty of it as well. You might be guilty of it as well. Mm-hmm. There are times that I make a mistake in my life and I'm forgiven by the person that I've hurt. However, I'm still struggling. And every time I engage with that person, I'm still sorrowful and asking for forgiveness. And so I think it's similar in the prison system. There are times that they atone for their sins, but they keep bringing it up. So you just have to remind them that, you know, God has already forgiven you. The person that you have affected has already forgiven you. Now it's time for you to forgive yourself.
So is it possible, and you've touched on it, what does a typical visitor program look like when you're serving in prison? So you're there for 3 days. What's that 3 days look like?
So typically, again, the first, it's 3.5 days. So we usually arrive Thursday evening. And again, we just offer them cookies, introduce ourselves to them, let them know that we're going to be spending the next 3.5 days with them. We also make sure that they understand, we remind them that during the application process, they signed a waiver that they would not have any visitors this weekend. So they know that even, you know, if they have family members that come every weekend, that this weekend is not an opportunity for that. And if they choose to ignore that rule and they have visitors, once they leave for any time frame, they will not be able to join us again. So that's the first night. And then when we go back on Friday, that's when we start with our witnesses. So over the weekend, there's about 7 to 9 witnesses that we share on various different topics. And we break them into small groups. So each one of us leads a table. There's the guiding principle is there needs to be one for every man in blue is what we call them, but the inmates. So there needs to be one volunteer for each inmate plus one. So if we're going in for a weekend and there's 32 men in blue, there needs to be 33 of us. And so we break into small groups. There's a leader, there's an observing leader, so the next person that's going to lead the retreat the following weekend. And then there's someone who has led, who is encouraging that current leader. And we spend the whole next 3 days just in small groups. We talk about the witnesses, and then we have one-on-one opportunities where we can listen to them. And again, we listen, love. We talk less and just listen to anything that they have to say. That first day is usually the toughest because, again, they obviously, there's these strangers that are sitting here letting them know that we are non-judgmental, and they have to see us in action before they start trusting us. And how we build that trust is we don't, there's about 9 sessions that we all have to attend prior to doing a weekend. So when we have chosen a weekend and agreed with the prison, we have to select that group of men that's going to go in for that weekend. And then we get together for 9 sessions to prep and to build camaraderie between us so that when we go in, we all know each other and can show that to the men in blue.
And I'm going to have to assume that these weekends are emotionally draining for the prisoners, but it's probably also a bit emotionally draining for you. So how do you stay spiritually nourished and grounded while serving in what I have to assume is an intense and emotionally demanding environment?
Absolutely. It's very draining, and we do our best to control our emotions while we are in the institution. We don't always succeed. Obviously, during that open mic, they sometimes see our emotions, and during the weekend, they will sometimes see our emotions. But we get together, so we don't stay overnight. We finished sometimes 10, 11 o'clock at night, and then we're back in at 7:30.
Okay.
But after each session, we go to a common area and we help support each other. And we talk about, hey, inmate Patrick might need some extra love. Inmate Julian, is opening up. Let's make sure that we talk about this. And so we that's how we support each other. But yes, typically when I go home on Sunday evening, I just take a shower and I disconnect. And my wife knows that I probably won't be very vocal because I need to regroup, and I typically take that Monday off from work as well.
Really? Okay.
Just to re-energize. But again, our pastor, Father Leo, interesting story. This organization was started in 1976 by a group of 9 men that we lovingly called the 9 old men. And Father Leo's father was one of those original 9 men. So Father Leo started this program when he was in college, and so he has that same passion and is always there to help support us.
So do you find that your ministry impacts your own understanding of the precious blood charism in new ways?
Yes, I think it helps me beyond the prison ministry because, again, I'm non judgmental at work, I'm non judgmental in my personal life, and I try to lead by example. So I live by the word, and I'm human, so I make mistakes. And when I make those mistakes, I ask for the forgiveness of God and whomever I've upset or offended.
Do you, speaking in terms of the larger precious blood community, do you find, have you received collaboration or support from the wider precious blood community?
Yes, absolutely. I was honored I went on to the assembly last year, or was it earlier this year? And I was asked to reflect after one of the homilies about my involvement in prison ministry. So, you know, the larger group knows each of us and our individual passions and gives us an opportunity to share that with the larger group.
So, for those who might be discerning how to live out their own call to serve, what do you say? What has prison ministry taught you about discipleship?
Prayer goes a long way. So if you are being called upon to do something that makes you nervous, pray about it, say yes. A perfect example would be this podcast. At the assembly, I was asked if I would be open to this, and I initially said no, absolutely not. I don't like talking about myself. I don't like talking about the things that I do because those are personal. But I prayed about it, and it actually took me months to respond to your email to say, yes, I'm ready. So if someone's discerning about anything specific, I say, pray about it, sit with it for a while. Whomever is approaching you on that, have conversations with them, find out what is it that you think I have. Obviously, Father Leo saw something in me when he heard my story and knew that I could impart some of that good example to the men in blue.
Well, I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you did agree to be our guest because this has been a fascinating conversation. So I've just got a few more questions. How have you personally, and we may have covered this already, but if we could maybe go into a little deeper, how have you personally seen hope restored through your ministry, and what does that phrase mean to you?
I see it every time that we go into prison. There are times that those men in blue are just ready to see us. They remember us by name. Many of them don't have family members that visit them. So even though we cannot be on their visitor list, they look forward to seeing us each month. And they are amazing. So even when we go in on that monthly check-in with them, they still own the meeting. Like, we go there and we're basically a fly on the wall. We come with cookies and coffee, but it's not like we go in and take over. It's just their normal meeting that we are attending. So I see it that way. I see it when we change their lives. And then I see it again when they have the opportunity of getting out and are able to get with us and thank us for our involvement. And, again, we have to humble ourselves and let them know that I was just there as a disciple of God, right? And, God helped me help you, so that it becomes less about us and more about the ministry and the work that we are doing. And, that's how we get our thanks.
Speaking of involvement, Julian, if any of the men out there listening want to get involved in prison ministry, how do they do so?
They can contact me. You have my contact information. They can just look at the Kairos website. If you Google Kairos International, we are involved in about 500 institutions.
Wow.
We are in 37 states and 9 countries with
Wow.
about 30,000 volunteers. So we're a large organization. I'm involved in Kairos Inside, where we go in for that 3.5 days. There's also Kairos Outside, where you meet with family members. It started with females, so the women that are involved in the prisoners' lives. But now it's basically any family member that has an incarcerated individual. That group ministers to them. And then the third shooting of our organization is Kairos Torch, which is the youth. So anyone that's that's incarcerated and is 25 years or younger, they would be part of the Kairos Torch. And it's interesting because that's the one that scares me the most. I've been tapped upon to go to their sessions once in a while, and I've continued to again, I think that's probably the tougher one, but that's just me being afraid of the unknown.
Well, this has been a fascinating and inspirational conversation, Julian. Thank you so much for being our guest again. Julian DaCosta with Kairos Ministry, is that correct? Kairos Ministry and a companion of the Missionaries of the Precious Blood. Julian, thank you so much for being our guest. If anyone's interested in learning more about Precious Blood spirituality, we are at preciousbloodus.org, and we're also on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So, Julian, thank you once again. It's been our pleasure, and we're hoping someday to have you on again.
Awesome. Thank you, and God bless.